Watch out. Unprotected pieces often get swept away by the mighty queen.
Thanks, Oliver. In this lecture, we'll be learning about queen forks. What exactly is a queen fork? It's when the queen attacks two unprotected pieces. Let's take a look at this first example where the two black knights are unprotected. They're not protecting each other, no one else is protecting them, so all the white queen has to do is queen there, attacking those two unprotected knights. Yes, black can save one of them, but not both. Black will lose at least one of those two knights. There is another move here that white can play. He can play queen here, and that's another queen fork, attacking the king, and next move the white queen will pick up the knight on a2. Alright, let's see some more examples. In this position, the white queen has many moves at her disposal, but which one is the one that attacks most targets? We'll take a look at that later. Now let's see all the moves the white queen can make and attack at least two targets. Take a look at this one. The queen is attacking no less than 3 black pawns, so that's a pretty good move. The queen can also go here to c2, and now the knight is under attack and so is the pawn on h2. So that's a queen fork, all right. Yes. What else? The queen can also come over here to h2, attacking the pawn and also the king. So that works. How about queen here? Yes, the queen is now attacking the knight and the pawn on a6. Or maybe the queen could come to b4 or even b2 and attack the knight and check the king. So the knight will be lost. And what else do we have? We have queen to d7 attacking those two pawns. We also have queen to d6 attacking the pawn on a6 and the king. Although in this position maybe black can play king here and protect his pawn. But of course, white can still make many winning moves like queen here. This knight will be lost thanks to a check, but never mind that. Now, there is another move that attacks no less than 4 different targets, and that move is queen to d3. So these examples go to show you that the queen is very versatile. It can attack many targets. It's like an octopus. It's got all those tentacles. It can attack many things simultaneously, many targets. It's a really powerful piece. So let's move on. And sometimes in order to fork 2 enemy pieces, we need to make an unusual move. For example, in this position, white's queen would like to attack the bishop and the knight, and the winning move is a retreat. Queen to d1. Instead of moving forward, the queen retreats, and now those 2 pieces are under attack, so white's going to win one of them. And white should win the game, of course. Alright, this is an interesting example because the white queen can attack 2 targets without even moving. It's a pawn that advances to g6, and now the pawn on h7 is under attack, and so is the knight on b5. So, since the threat of queen takes h7, followed by queen to h8, and then pick up the black queen is the strongest one, black should probably take here and just lose his knight, but this position should be winning for white. Alright, here's another example from a game. White now played d3 and black went d4. Now, whenever your opponent makes a move, you've got to study the consequences of your next move. So if you're thinking, alright, my knight is under attack, I should move it somewhere, for example to e2, before you actually move it, you've got to ask yourself, what can my opponent do if I do that? And unfortunately, white didn't do that, and he played knight to e2, and the queen came to a5, delivered a check, and then the bishop was lost. So that bishop on b5 is a problem, and maybe we can get rid of our problem. We could have played, before moving our knight, we could have played bishop takes c6. Now when the knight takes, then we go to e2, and we don't have the problem on b5 anymore. So this position should be about equal. Okay, but we don't lose a piece like in the game. So remember, just think twice before you make a move. Think about your opponent's possibilities. What can you do if you make the move that you're thinking about? That's a good question to ask yourself. Alright, this is another position where black's king is still in the middle of the board, white's king is already castled. Taking on e4 is actually a good move. Not so much because it wins a pawn, but because black can play d5 next move. For example, after rook to e1, black can now go d5, then we take, he takes back, and then we go knight c3. And it's a very interesting position because the pawn is pinned, he can't take because the queen would be on. The knight can't move because he's pinned also. So that means this knight is attacking those two black pieces. And when the black queen moves, then we can take on e4. And this position is about even, but there are chances for both sides. It's a book position, all right? But in the game, black decided to play d5, which is rather risky because the king is still in the middle and we're opening up the e-file just like that. Very risky. Pawn takes pawn, and now black should probably take on d5, although his position is not easy after rook to e1. Instead of that, black went knight to a5, and just when he expected the white rook to go to e1 like it normally does, and then black would go bishop b7, white found queen here, check, and now the knight on a5, which is unprotected, is lost. So the game is over. And this is another interesting position where black went queen to e7 check. And again, you should ask yourself what happens if I make the move that I'm thinking about. Again, white didn't do that, and after knight to e2, which looks like a logical move because he's thinking about castling here and then putting his rook to e1 and attack the queen and the king perhaps, unfortunately he didn't see that the queen from e7 could also go here to b4, and now the bishop on c4 is completely lost. Game over. Now there's something else I wanted to tell you about queen forks. You've got to think about the defensive possibilities of your opponent. For example, take a look at this position where white can go queen to c5 and attack those two knights. It looks as though white's going to win one of them, but they can defend each other like this. So that's not the best move. And maybe white can just go queen to f2. This would have been way better, okay, because now the knight is completely lost. No chance for him to defend. So remember, be careful because sometimes your opponent can defend against the queen fork.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.